stressed out. Everything just feels like a test. I feel so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. Tell me that I can and I won't. That's what guides me the most. Your lies, I'll do what I want.
Welcome to Panda Dexterous. I'm Panda, and today we're talking about Path of Titans. The game currently has 36 playable dinosaurs, and that is a lot for a new player to learn. This is a guide on how to tell them apart, what people call them, and what to be aware of when you encounter them. Before we get started, there is some terminology to go over. Dinosaurs are split into two basic types: herbivores that eat plants, usually shortened to herb or herby, and carnivores that eat meat, usually shortened to carn or carny. There are more carnivore options than herbivore options in the game at this time, but that is due to aquatics and flyers being exclusively carnivores. For all of your land-based and semi-aquatic dinosaurs, it is split pretty even right now. If you know of a prehistoric herbivore that could fly, I would love to know what it is. I haven't found one yet. We're going to start easy with dinos that have a distinct shape or movement and shouldn't get confused with something else once you get a look at them. This is all based on my personal opinion and game experiences. You are welcome to disagree with me. A Margosaurus, usually called an amarg or a margi, is a herbivore. It is a land-based. It is the only sauropod in the game. It may or may not have spines. It moves slow, but it has a lot of stamina. It has a headbutt attack that will do bleed if it does have spines. It has an AoE stomp that does a lot of damage, and it does have a tail that will do a lot of knockback. They are very hard to tail ride, which is when you follow really close to the tail because of that knockback. Anodontosaurus, usually called an Anki, Ano, I call him a potato. This is a land-based herbivore. It is the only agiosaurid in the game. It moves slow, but again, a lot of stam. Most of the ones you run into are going to have hunker, which means they will crouch down. They take very little damage, but they also can't move when doing this. For attacks, they have an AoE tail slam that does a lot of damage. They also have tail attack, which will do fracture, and bone snap, which is a charge up and will do fracture. This one can also cause a bone break if they hit high enough fracture. Barsboldia, usually called a bars or a cow, is a land-based herbivore. It is the biggest dinosaur in the game currently. It's not very fast. It doesn't have a ton of stam. It does okay for its size. It does have a headbutt attack that does a little bit. Its main attacks are going to be a side-to-side tail sweep that does a little bit of knockback, and then it has a tail slam. There's no AoE on this at this time, but it does do a lot of damage. Camptosaurus, usually called a campto, is another land-based herbivore. It has an ability that lets it hop like a kangaroo. When doing that, it is the fastest land speed dinosaur in the game currently. The only attack it has is a bite. Ceratosaurus, usually called a Cera or Cerato, is a land-based carnivore. It's a very stocky looking dinosaur, lots of bumps and ridges. They have an ability called Crack Scoots, which will reflect damage onto you when you attack them. It can have a knockback attack, which is a forward moving shove attack. It has a taunt ability, which will slow enemies around it that are not in its group. Notably, this will slow a Hatzegopteryx enough that it cannot take off by running alone. It would need to get to something to jump off in order to take off. Concavinator, usually shortened to Conch, is a carnivore. It will start as a land-based dinosaur. It has the option to become a semi-aquatic based on the abilities that you pick. If it has dive, that means it is semi-aquatic. It can dive underwater. It can regenerate stamina in the water. If it has ripping kick, it will not be able to dive or regenerate stamina in the water. It can still be built as a fast swimmer on the surface of the water and have ripping kick. Uranosaurus, usually called a dolphin or a fish, is a fully aquatic carnivore. It is the fastest water speed carnivore, pretty good stam in the water as well. It does have a lunge ability that lets it jump out of the water. This can be used to escape if traveling in a river and jumping over a waterfall to get to another section quickly. Kaiwekia, usually shortened to Kai, the other aquatic carnivore currently available in the game. They are very loud. Attack-wise, they have a bite and a barrel roll. They do also have the lunge that lets them jump out of the water. Metriacanthosaurus, shortened to Metri, is a land-based carnivore. Depending on the subspecies, it'll have a wattle under the chin or it'll have feathers on the back. This dinosaur can heal itself, and it can heal people in its group with a voice call. It does have some other support calls as well. If you are in a group fighting another group that has a Metri, usually you want the Metri to go down first. Pachycephalosaurus, usually shortened to Patchy, sometimes pronounced as Packy, also called a goat. This is a land-based herbivore. It's a very agile dinosaur. It has a lot of mobility options. It can have the scavenger diet, which is typically a carnivore diet, allowing it to eat from the corpses that are around the map, specific critters that have noxious meat, as well as fish and bones. Pycnonemosaurus, usually shortened to Pic or Pycno, is a land-based carnivore. It has several options for head-based attacks, bites, and headbutts. It can have a charge, juke, or tail attack, but only 2 out of the 3. It does have cracked scoots like the Cerrado, which means you will take reflective damage if attacking it. It is on the faster side and does have a lot of stam as well. Spinosaurus is usually shortened to Spino or Spoon, and it is a semi-aquatic carnivore. It has a very large sail on the back, easy to recognize. Attack-wise, it has a bite attack. It also has a claw attack. It can have a tail attack with knockback, but it may run a swim tail instead. It does have an AoE stomp attack as well, only usable when standing. Stegosaurus is usually called a steg or a stego. It is a land-based herbivore. It has pretty good speed and stamina, especially for its size. It does churn very quickly. It has 2 tail attacks, both that cause bleed. One is a charge up and one is just a swing. Suchomimus, shortened to Sucho, is a semi-aquatic carnivore. It has pretty good speed on land for a semi-aquatic. You can make it extremely fast in water, but you do take away a lot of its attacks by doing so. It can have an AoE stomp attack, but it can also have webbed feet, which again allows it to swim faster. And it can have a tail attack with knockback, or it will have a swim tail equipped. Struthiomimus, also called a struth, struthy, or chicken, is a land-based herbivore. Moves a lot like an ostrich. Very fast, lots of stamina. It has 2 different kick attacks it can pick from, or leap, which means it wouldn't have any attacks. It is one of 2 dinosaurs with the insectivore diet, the other being a carnivore, and this allows it to eat insects. It also has a selection of combat calls that it can use for itself and its group members, as well as a selection of survival calls it can use for itself and group members. It has to pick between the 2. Now we're going to look at dinosaurs that can be confused with each other. Some of these are situational issues, some are language issues, and some are visual issues. Again, all of this is based on my personal opinion and game experiences, so you are welcome to disagree with me. Alioramus and Allosaurus. This is a language issue. Their short names, Alio and Allo, sound similar, they look similar, but visually they're distinct and you won't mix them up when you see them. Alioramus, shortened to Alio, is a land-based carnivore. It is a faster dinosaur with good stamina. It is one of the Tyrannosaurids, so it does have access to Tyrant Roar when in a group. The other Tyrannosaurids are the Tyrannosaurus and the Daspliosaurus. Allosaurus, shortened to Allo, is a land-based carnivore. It's a very stocky dinosaur. It has 2 options for a bite attack. It has a claw attack, it is a bleeder as well, and it does have a tail attack. Iguanodon and Lambeosaurus. This is a situational visual issue. Both are hadrosaurids, both can switch from quadrupedal and bipedal movement, and both are similar in size and build. That said, the head and forelimbs are visually distinct and they have different roles and approaches in combat situations as well. Iguanodon, also called an Iggy, is a land-based herbivore. It has pretty good speed and stam. It's a very good swimmer. It can have a charge. It can have an AoE front attack. It can have a tail knockback attack. It does a small amount of bleed. Most of the attacks that it have require it to move slowly, and it typically is going to be more of a defensive dinosaur for that reason. Lambeosaurus, usually called a lamb, is a land-based herbivore. It has pretty good speed and stam. It's also a good swimmer. This is a dinosaur that can heal itself and its group members. It does have other options for calls that it can use, but you typically are not going to see them as much as having it as a herbivore healer for its group. Dinocheirus and Deinonychus. This is a language issue. Their full names are very similar, but they are very different dinosaurs. You're not going to confuse them visually. Most players will likely relate Dean or Dino with the raptor without other context. Dinocheirus, usually called the duck, is the only semi-aquatic herbivore. It has okay speed and stamina, but it definitely does better in the water. Attack-wise, it has a bite, claw, and tail attack. It may swap the tail for a swim tail. It can have the fisher diet, which is typically a carnivore diet, and this will allow it to eat fish and shellfish. On the topic of raptors, we have Achillobator, Deinonychus, and Latanovenatrix. Achillobator has a situational issue when they are young. They will be a similar size and shape compared to the other two, but as an adult, it is easy to identify. Deinonychus and Latanovenatrix have a visual issue where they are similar size and shape at any growth stage. They're also small and agile dinosaurs, which makes it difficult to get a good look at them. The most identifiable differences for me are tail shape, sounds, and accent feathers. Both are called chickens, raptors, or rats interchangeably. Achillobator, also called Achi, Achillo, Kilo, or Turkey, is a land-based carnivore. It has a variety of bite and claw attacks as well as a kicking attack. It can pounce large dinosaurs. It can also cause some bleed, but it's not a heavy bleeder. Deinonychus, also called a Dean, Dino, or Dinon, is a land-based carnivore. It can be built as a support dinosaur. It does have several bite options, and it is a pouncing dinosaur as well. It does have the Lucky Feather ability, which will let it survive an attack that would kill it if it is at full health. Latanovenatrix, usually called a Latin, it is another fast and agile dinosaur with good stamina. It is notably slower than the Dinon. It has a variety of bite attacks, and it can also pounce. They have access to a variety of bonuses that occur at nighttime and will be more dangerous to fight at night. Kentrosaurus and Miragaia have a visual issue where they are also similar in size and shape, especially when they are further away or you don't have a clear view of them. The key differences are that a Kentrosaurus has shoulder spikes that go out to the sides, and the Miragaia holds its neck up more straight and above the body. Kentrosaurus is called a Kent or a Kentro. It is a land-based herbivore with a blocky body and 2 rows of spikes down the back. It also has the shoulder spikes that go out the sides. It has a variety of tail attack options. It also has the spit debuff. It is also a bleeder and supports other bleeders very well. Miragaia, usually shortened to Mira, is a land-based herbivore. It also has a blocky body with 2 rows of spikes down the back. Usually a Mira is built around their hide selection, so they will either be mud, toxin, or venom builds. It has a variety of tail attack options as well as the spit debuff. And all Miras have paralysis, which means when you attack them, you will gradually slow down until you freeze in place. Megalania and Sarcosuchus have a situational visual issue where they are both semi-aquatic and have a low body profile. When you are on land and you see something move on the surface of the water, it can be difficult to tell the difference initially, but once you have a clear look, they are easy to tell apart. Megalania is usually called a meg. It is a carnivore that starts land-based and becomes semi-aquatic once you have the dive ability. It has a couple of bite attacks and it also does a venom debuff. Sarcosuchus, also called a sark, sarco, croc, or gator, is a semi-aquatic carnivore. It looks like a crocodile or alligator. They are an ambusher, so they will be under the surface of the water until an opportunity arises for them to attack. It can have the clamp ability, which allows it to pick up dinosaurs that are smaller than itself. They can then move with that dinosaur, usually bringing a land-based dinosaur to water where it will struggle to swim, allowing the sarco to attack it more freely. Daspletosaurus and Tyrannosaurus have a situational visual issue. A young Tyrannosaurus is a similar size and shape compared to a grown Daspletosaurus. However, a young Tyrannosaurus will have a bulkier build and likely a plainer coloration than your grown Daspletosaurus will. Daspletosaurus, usually called a dasp, is a land-based carnivore. It is a tyrannosaurid, so it can have tyrant roar. Some of its bites can do fracture damage, and it can do a bone break as well. Tyrannosaurus, typically called Rex, is a land-based carnivore. It's a very big, bulky dinosaur. It's slow, doesn't have a lot of stam. It is one of the Tyrannosaurids, so it also has access to Tyrant Roar when it is in a group. It can also have an AoE stomp attack. It can also fracture and cause a bone break with some of its attacks. Tyrannosaurus also has a language issue with the Tyrannotitan, as they both have similar names and are both apex carnivores, but they are visually distinct. Tyrannotitan, usually called a Titan. Some people call it a Tyranno, which is not helpful. It is a land-based carnivore. It is an apex, but it is fast for its size, and it has pretty good stamina as well. It has several bite attacks, several voice calls. It has a tail attack with knockback. It is also a bleeder and does a lot of bleed damage. It can combine its heavy bite and juke very effectively to deal with things that are behind it. Albertoceratops, Eotriceratops, and Styracosaurus are all the ceratopsians in the game. I have seen newer players refer to all of them as trikes, which is not very helpful. Additionally, a young Eotriceratops has a similar size and shape as an adult Albertoceratops. The Styracosaurus and the Albertoceratops are also a similar size when adult and have a similar side profile. Other than that, they are visually distinct and should be easy to tell apart. Albertoceratops, also called an Albert, Alberta, or Berta, is a land-based herbivore. It has a couple of horn attack options, as well as a front stomp, a back kick, and a charge attack. Eotriceratops, usually called an Eo, is a land-based herbivore. It is also rotund, not very fast. It doesn't have good stamina. It has a horn attack, a charge, and an AoE stomp. It can also sharpen its horns for more damage. Styracosaurus is usually called a sty or a styra. It is a land-based herbivore, and again, it is rotund. It has pretty good speed and stamina, and it does cause a lot of bleed damage, but it tends to be more of a glass cannon. It doesn't take damage very well. Hatzegopteryx, Rhamphorhynchus, and Thalassodromius are all the flyers in the game. They are visually distinct, but if you can't see them and all you hear are flapping wings, it can be difficult to identify which is which. Hatzegopteryx is usually called a Hatz or a Quetz. It is a carnivore and the largest flyer available in the game. It has good speed, especially when flying. Stamina can be an issue depending on how you build it. It has an ability called Wing Beat that causes a lot of knockback, and it can use that flying or on ground. It also has the clamp ability, so it can grab smaller dinosaurs, and it can take off while holding a dinosaur, so it typically will try to drop them from the sky. If it is slowed by a debuff, it will have difficulty taking off, and if it has been pounced by a smaller dinosaur like one of the raptors, it is not able to take off until it is no longer pounced. Rhamphorhynchus is usually called a Ramph, Ratbat, or Sky Rat. It is a carnivore, it is a flyer, and it is semi-aquatic. It is currently the smallest dinosaur available in the game. It cannot directly attack other players. It also has the Lucky Feather ability, which means when it is at full health, it can survive a single attack that would otherwise have killed it. Thalassodromius, usually called a Thou. It is a carnivore, flyer, and also semi-aquatic. Has pretty good speed and stamina. For attacks, it only has a bite. Can use that while grounded or while flying. And that is all of the official dinosaurs in the game. Thank you to my friends who helped me make this. You know who you are, and I really appreciate it. I hope this has been helpful, but more than that, I hope you have fun playing. It's a game that I've enjoyed for a long time now, and of course, if there's any questions that you think I could answer, feel free to ask.